Welcome to Employee Termination Tips. My name is Christopher Neufeld Legal. And in this particular video, we're going to be talking about the situation of having pending layoffs, terminations, or even your personal firing from your job, and undertaking the preservation and retention of your employment records. Now, the reason you need to retain your records, and in part it's because you probably stored important material that is personal to yourself, personal to your employment situation, as opposed to information that is proprietary to the company, is that you use the company's cell phone, you use an email, they send the emails to you, you have the materials there. You need to be shifting that materials to your personal systems, whether on a flash drive, on your personal computer, or elsewhere, because it's not going to be easy to access those materials or retain them once you're terminated. Because all too often, immediately after, or even right in the process of being terminated, they disable your emails, they cut off your access to your cell phone, your computer, and then trying to gain access to this stuff in the short time frame that you're going to have to make a decision with respect to your termination package. Companies are very reluctant oftentimes to provide you with information that you should have in your possession. And this is problematic because they're telling you, well, we're not going to give you all the information. We're telling you what it is, and you have to believe us and rely upon the limited information that we're providing you with. Not really the best of scenarios. And this is material that you should have in your possession or you should be able to access. So you got to take it upon yourself, provided that you check through the retention policies and the copying policies to make sure you're not doing anything inappropriate. And this isn't inappropriate, but you got to also recognize that there's some companies that monitor like crazy and are very skeptical and feel like there's a lot of subterfuge going on. But this is materials that you should have in your possession outside of the workplace. And what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about your employment contracts. Those contracts that set out what the arrangement you have with your boss, your employer, as to what your form of pay is, what your termination arrangements are, what kind of benefits you receive, how much vacation pay, so on and so forth. You also should have those related policies and manuals that relate to your employment, your leave, how you are paid, what the conditions for laying off people are, what vacation pay is, how overtime pay is calculated, so on and so forth. Also, any accolades and awards that you received, any positive reviews, you want to have copies of those. You don't want to leave them on the company's system because then they're not accessible. You want to have those. Similarly, any disciplinary actions or reprimands, you want to have the specifics as to these scenarios. You don't want them coming up with stuff and then not being able to gain access to them, or at least not being able to review them in the immediate aftermath of being terminated, laid off, fired, or even leaving your job. You want to have all communications dealing with and with respect to human resources, payroll, benefits, compensation. You want to have those. You want to have the emails. You want to know the substance of them so you're correctly on point when you're dealing with them. Similarly, any inappropriate communications that you receive from anybody in the office, whether it's discriminatory, sexual, harassment-based, racial, gender-based, or otherwise, those communications should be made available to yourself, but you should actually have a copy backed up for yourself, because trying to gain access to it again is not going to be very easy to do after you've been let go. Anything with respect to overtime work, whether it's requests from your boss to do work outside of normal scope, outside of normal hours, communications with respect to what you're doing above and beyond the standard practice and what you're being told about it. Similarly, you want to be looking at payroll-related matters, including bonuses, allowances, benefits, RRSPs, pensions. Similarly, vacation arrangements, statutory holiday arrangements. You want to collect all that, as well as anything else that is unusual or suspicious related to your work. It may seem weird. It's worthwhile to have copies of that. You never know how it's going to play out, and you never know how your former employer now and your former boss is going to treat this. So you want to have the materials to back up your position. What we're not suggesting, however, is taking anything that's proprietary in nature that is appropriately corporate property. What instead we're talking about is stuff that was meant for you in a personal capacity. It is in your employment capacity, and it is what you should have. So whether it's pay statements that you haven't been downloading off the system, whether it's emails, communications, reference letters, all that kind of stuff, you want to make sure you have it backed up and outside of their system. Because as soon as you're shut down, they're not going to make it easy for you to get stuff that you need to advance your position. And this is all the materials that you need to be having available to yourself to properly review and look at when either you or you in conjunction with your lawyer are assessing what the termination package is, whether you've been fully paid out or there is an issue of payment that needs to be addressed. And you can't do this in a vacuum. And you can't expect them to just offer up all the information that you need. You need to be somewhat proactive. And at the same time, you need to be cautious as to not doing stuff in a way that entices them to take inappropriate action. This material really is within the ambit of what you're entitled to. And if they're making an issue of it, that really should not be an issue that they should act upon. You need to talk to legal counsel at that time, because making sure that you have the materials and having concerns with respect to your employment status, it's only appropriate that you have backup copies of your employment materials, because that material was meant for you in your personal capacity. Those materials were meant to be disclosed to you and retained by yourself. And given that you might not have retained them, you need to be proactive in taking those materials back, because it's not something that they can withhold from you. And if they're doing that, or they use it as a basis to challenge you, that of itself is inappropriate. It reflects their lack of good faith and their inappropriate proceeding to challenge yourself, because this is materials, much of which is legally entitled for you to hold in your personal capacity and to have retained outside of the corporate sphere. And that is what you really should be looking to do if there is the impending possibility of layoffs, terminations, even acquisitions of the company by someone else that's going to see large dismissals or shifting out, or you might be in a position where you're going to be asked to transfer to another position that's not entirely in your best interest. Then you have to be taking that proactive approach and start reviewing that material. Oftentimes, making the push to early on review them with a lawyer so you know where you stand and you know how to approach everything going forward, because you don't want to be blindsided and you don't want to have a lack of materials impacting you adversely. Thank you.